Tonight, you're not chasing meaning like it owes you money. You're lying still, somewhere warm enough to be honest, while the world does that quiet thing it does when it thinks nobody is watching. Before you fall asleep, you'll sit beside an ancient scroll like it's a bedside lantern. You'll learn how Egypt tried to turn dreams into something you could index sign. Outcome, instruction kept close like medicine. And you'll watch a small symbol become a lever, the kind that can move a whole day without making any noise. A reed pen scratches, oil lamp smoke curls in slow ribbons. Papyrus fibers sigh under a careful thumb. Something nearby keeps time, a lamp flame, stubborn and steady, flicking its light against the wall like a soft metronome. And if your breathing starts to follow it, perfect. Inhale 4, exhale 6. If nights like this keep you company, you can subscribe only if you want to. And if you share where and what time you're listening from, maybe the little reed pen scratch will remember you there. Because tonight's story doesn't begin with a pyramid, or a curse, or a god shouting in thunder. It begins with a practical question whispered into papyrus. What do you do with a dream in the morning? You might not expect your most confusing dreams to come with something like a user manual, but in ancient Egypt, night came with paperwork. You can imagine it. The house is finally quiet. The last clay cup is rinsed. The courtyard dog has stopped arguing with the moon, and someone carefully slides a rolled sheet of papyrus a little closer to their bed. Not to read like a thrilling story, just to know what to do if they see, for example, a talking crocodile offering them bread. Tonight, you don't have to remember anything. You can just lie there, listening, while a very old world tries to explain to you how to read your own sleep. The room we're in is small and familiar. Woven mats, low ceiling blackened by years of oil lamp smoke, a jar of water keeping cool in the corner, like a patient little moon. On one wall, your shadow breathes with the flame. On the other, a narrow shelf holds the important things. A small statue of a protective god with round, watchful eyes, a lump of incense wrapped in linen, and the scroll. It is not a glamorous scroll. The fibers are a little frayed. The ink shines in some places and is faded to the color of weak tea in others. But for the family that lives here, it is a quiet tool. In Egypt, a dream is not just a strange late-night movie. It is a message that arrives when the noisy half of you is finally too tired to interfere. The waking self steps aside. The half-self comes in, looking slightly disheveled but full of opinions. The scroll is there to translate between the two. If you dream of a cow, it might mean harvest. If you dream of finding yourself in someone else's clothes, it might mean a change in rank, or that your neighbors have been talking. The book doesn't care if the dream feels embarrassing. It just wants to file it in the correct drawer. Not everyone has a scroll like this, of course. Papyrus has to be grown, cut, soaked, pressed, dried, and persuaded into staying flat, which is a lot of effort just so you can look up what it means when you dream about a goose staring at you. So the key to this little night code usually belongs to a specific person. Sometimes it's a scribe who spends all day writing receipts for grain and orders for bricks, and enjoys perhaps too much the quiet power of being. The one who can also read what the gods supposedly whispered to you in your sleep. Sometimes it's a priest who knows the temple's own dream texts, the ones that connect certain images to purity, ritual timing, and the mood of a particular god. And sometimes it's not an official at all, but an older woman in the household who has simply heard so many dreams across so many years that her memory functions as a living index. Children grow up knowing that if they see something odd in a dream, they will have to tell her in the morning, and she will nod, think, and say something calm that turns fear into a small task. In a world where only a minority can read, owning the meaning of dreams is a subtle kind of social power. Tonight, you don't need to own anything. You just get to borrow the feeling of having a scroll beside your bed, ready to tell you that whatever you dream, there will be a line for it somewhere. The way the dream book works is both simple and strangely satisfying. Imagine someone has taken the chaos of sleep and broken it into little pieces like grammar. Instead of nouns and verbs, there are sections for water, bread, beer, snakes, birds, teeth, chariots, infants, and because this is Egypt, quite a lot of entries involving crocodiles minding other people's business. Each entry usually begins the same way. If a man sees himself, or if a woman dreams she, and in the scene. Eating something, wearing something, speaking to someone, falling from somewhere. Next to it, the result, good or bad, gain or loss, long life or illness, favor or trouble. It's almost disappointingly blunt. You might expect pages of mystical poetry, but what you get instead is something like a catalog crossed with a weather forecast. If he sees himself looking through a window, good. It means he will see what is hidden. If he sees himself dead, good. It means a long life, favored by the gods. If he sees himself feasting, beware, it may mean loss. Dreams in the system are just tiny reports about how tomorrow's mood might unfold. People consult this grammar the way someone today might scroll through a search engine at 3 a.m, asking, what does it mean if I dreamed of losing my shoes in a river? Only instead of a glowing screen, there is the soft crackle of papyrus, the smell of ink that once was soot and gum and water. There might be a sleepy argument over whether a dream counts as eating fish if, in the dream, the fish was talking and refused to be eaten. The book does not specify this. It is very thorough, but it is not prepared for every creative detail the mind can invent on a hot night. In those cases, the interpreter has to improvise, stitching together what they know. A talking fish is still a fish, they might decide, and the fact that it refused you probably belongs to the obstacle category. The dreamer nods, half relieved, half worried, and then, because the chores won't do themselves, they go back to work. Night may be mysterious, but the day still needs its brick quotas. One of the most curious things about this system is how often it flips the obvious meaning upside down. You would think that dreaming of death is bad news, but the book is cheerfully reassuring about it. Seeing yourself lying as a corpse can be interpreted as a sign that your life will be long, your name well remembered, your place stable. Your waking mind hears death and immediately panics. The dream book pats that mind on the head and says very calmly, no, that one is fine. On the other hand, dreaming of a pleasant peace can carry a warning. Too much abundance in sleep might signal scarcity in waking life, as if the balance of the universe is gently adjusting itself even in your imagination. Dreaming of fresh bread can mean prosperity. Dreaming of stale bread can mean difficulty. And somewhere among the entries, someone has written that dreaming of one's teeth falling out is not about the dentist at all, but about family and inheritance, which is the kind of interpretation that makes you quietly reconsider how often you complain about relatives. This habit of reversing meanings keeps the interpreter in business. If every dream meant exactly what it looked like, people would need the book only once. But when a snake can mean healing, a flood can mean cleansing, and a funeral can mean celebration, you cannot trust your first instinct. You need a calm figure flipping through columns of ink by lamplight to tell you that your mind has played a grammatical trick. And maybe, secretly, that calm figure also needs the ritual. It is comforting to believe that behind the swirling collage of night images there is a pattern, and that someone, somewhere, has cracked at least part of the code and written it down in slightly crooked hieratic script. Of course, not every dream feels worth decoding. Some nights you wake, squint at the darkness, and decide that your vision of chasing a runaway loaf of bread down an endless staircase is too tiring to talk about. But when a dream feels heavy, when it lingers like smoke long after the lamp is out people in, Egypt had a set of small rituals, like a toolkit for the soul. Water is the first tool. You wash your hands, your face, sometimes your whole body, letting the night's images slide away with the dust. The Nile itself is a kind of giant reset button. Stepping to its edge at dawn, You might whisper the dream to the current and ask it politely to mind its own business downstream. There's incense, too, pellets of resin and herbs dropped onto a coal so that the smoke curls through the room like a tiny priest, touching walls, corners, and the place where you sleep. The words spoken over that smoke are usually simple. A short prayer to a household god, a request to untie any knots of trouble the dream has tied. It is less drama than maintenance, like checking the locks before bed. Gamuets help turn fear into something you can hold. There are eyes carved from faience, blue and glossy like little pieces of sky, meant to watch over you even while your own eyes are closed. There are knots of red cord, twisted in certain ways and tied around the wrist or pinned to a pillow, echoing the sacred knot of Isis that itself looks like a folded sash. A small figure of Tolret, the hippopotamus goddess with a serious expression and enormous belly, might stand near a pregnant woman's bed, scowling at any harmful spirit that has the nerve to wander in. A lock of hair can be wound around a string tied in a knot to hold. A good outcome and untied later when the danger has passed, the way you might finally exhale after holding your breath longer than you meant to. Even writing the dream down, copying its bones onto a little scrap of papyrus can help. Once the images have been pressed into ink, they feel slightly less like a storm inside your chest and more like something waiting calmly in a drawer. When a dream is serious enough, or when several nights in a row seem to agree on the same troubling theme, the household solutions might not feel like quite enough. Then the temple becomes a kind of night clinic. You can picture the forecourt as the sky cools, tall columns holding up stars, priests moving like very slow, very dignified owls. Someone arrives with their dream, carrying it the way they might carry an ache that won't go away. The priest listens, nods, and sets the dream inside a larger story, one that includes gods, balance, and the ever-patient concept of math, the rightness of things. Instead of saying, "That's terrible," the priest might say, "Ah, this sounds like the time a certain god had that dream." And suddenly the fear becomes part of a myth that has already been resolved somewhere in divine memory. Sometimes the solution is ritual, offerings of beer, bread, oil, perhaps a simple figurine placed before a statue. Sometimes it is a night spent in the temple itself. You might sleep on a mat in a side chamber, hoping that a god will send a clearer dream, a second message to correct the first. The temple becomes something like a very quiet hospital ward, where the only equipment is incense, stone, and the human habit of wanting reassurance. The priests are, in their own way, therapists with elaborate costumes, reassuring people that a frightening image does not have to mean a frightening future. In the morning, the dreamer leaves with a new interpretation, some instructions, avoid this, do that, and perhaps a sense that the universe has been persuaded to adjust its plans slightly, or at least to send a gentler metaphor next time. Underneath all of this, the scrolls, the amulets, the temple visits, there is a softer truth that moves as slowly as the Nile at night. A dream manual is comforting mainly because it promises that the one thing you cannot control, your own sleeping mind, can still be negotiated with. If you see this, it means that. If you dream of crossing a river, perhaps it means safe travel. If you dream of your house catching fire, perhaps it means purification, not disaster. The rules vary from scroll to scroll, from temple to village, but the pattern is the same. Anxiety is given a script. Instead of lying awake wondering what a nightmare means, a person can say, the book says this is a sign of long life, and the heart, still beating faster than it would like, can at least slow down enough to let morning arrive. It's strangely familiar, even from here. People now fall down small digital tunnels, searching for explanations of dreams about teeth and ex-lovers and flying over traffic. The ancient Egyptian version is slower and quieter. There's more dust, more ink, fewer pop-up ads. But the impulse is the same, to believe that your inner life has subtitles and that someone somewhere has taken the time to write them down. The dream book also reveals what people fear and hope for most: sickness, betrayal, famine, safe childbirth, the outcome of a journey, the favor of a superior, the stability of the Nile's next flood. Reading through the entries is like listening in on centuries of whispered worries, all stacked neatly into columns. If you like, you can borrow a little bedtime oath from them tonight without taking the heavy parts. Something like, let the dreams come as they wish, let the good ones be a comfort, let the strange ones be a story, let the frightening ones be instructions that I am free to edit in the morning. You don't have to say it out loud. You can just think it once, the way a scribe might draw a single, careful line of ink and then blow gently to dry it. Imagine setting your own mind on a small mental shelf. In one jar, the dream itself, images, feelings, fragments, and in another jar, very close by, the meaning, which you will open only if you need it, and only with kindness. Around you, the imaginary room in Egypt is getting darker. The lamp burns lower, making the ink on the scroll look almost wet again, as if the words are being written fresh each time you glance at them. Outside, the Nile is turning to silver. Somewhere, a boat moves along the night route that even Ra's priests could chart like a timetable. The dog in the courtyard has forgotten about the moon and is curled into itself, chasing a very ordinary dream about bones. The guardian statue on the shelf keeps its little stone eyes wide open because somebody in this house should. You don't need to. Your breathing has its own quiet rhythm now, like a reed swaying in shallow water. Whatever you dream, water or bread, snakes or laughter, old fears dressed up as new stories, that ancient manual would have something to say about it. But for tonight, you don't have to look anything up. You can let the pictures drift past, untranslated, while the scroll waits politely by the bed, and the night continues, page after page, long after you have already slipped out of the story and into sleep. You might not expect the moon to have paperwork, but in ancient Egypt, the moon is rarely allowed to simply glow and mind its own business. It has to count as something. It has to mean something. It has to show up on time like a modest lamp that never brags about being a lamp. And if the moon has to be measured, someone has to do the measuring, which is how you end up with both quiet, sharp-eyed, and famously patient doing what amounts to night accounting for the universe. If you're listening and your room is still, let it stay that way. Let the air be gentle. Let the day be finished. If you're still awake in a few minutes, you can subscribe. Or you can let that thought float away like a scrap of papyrus that forgot why it was important. Thoth won't be offended. Thoth is used to people misplacing things. Picture a small desk, low to the ground, and a scribe's palette resting on it like a sleepy animal. 2 shallow wells of ink, one black, one red. A reed pen that has been chewed just enough to make it obedient. The lamp beside it breathes a steady, oily light, and the shadows in the room move like slow water. Outside, the Nile is doing its usual nighttime work soft, continuous, quietly persuasive. Somewhere far off, a frog tries a short song and then decides it's not worth the effort. This is the kind of hour when the world looks less like a battlefield and more like a ledger, and you can almost understand why a god would choose to be a scribe. Thoth is a strange comfort because he feels practical. He is a god, yes, but he is not a thunder and fire sort of god. He is the god who notices, the god who records, the god who makes sure the correct words are in the correct places, because words in Egypt are not just decoration, words are tools. Words are little levers. If you know the right name of a thing, if you pronounce it carefully, if you write it with the right strokes, reality behaves a little better, like a donkey that respects a familiar voice. Sometimes Thoth is imagined as an ibis, thin and elegant, standing near water as if he is listening to it think. Sometimes he is a baboon, which is a less glamorous image, but also somehow perfect. A baboon looks like a creature that has opinions about order. A baboon looks like it would absolutely judge your handwriting. In temple scenes, baboons sit with their hands raised toward the rising sun, and you can read it as worship, or you can read it as a very early morning meeting with a strict agenda. The moon in this world is not just a pretty circle. It is a clock face that moves. It is a calendar that changes shape. It is a reminder that time is not smooth. It comes in pieces. And those pieces matter. Farmers care about the flood in the fields. Yes, but priests care about days that are right. Days that are pure days that are suitable for certain offerings. Days that are not suitable for anything except staying home and being polite to your own misfortune. Time itself has rules. If time has rules, someone has to know them. That's Thoth. You can imagine him moving through the night with a calm expression, carrying something that looks like a tablet or a scroll, checking the moon's condition the way a careful person checks the lid of a storage jar. Is it full? Is it thin? Is it recovering from being thin? Is it behaving like a moon should behave? There's a gentle absurdity to it, because the moon is enormous and distant and cold. And yet in Egypt, it can be treated like a thing that can be managed, like grain, like linen, like a household inventory. The universe is big, but the human mind likes a checklist. And Thoth, famously, likes a checklist too. In the soft logic of myth, the moon and Thoth belong together because both are about reflection. The moon reflects sunlight. Thoth reflects meaning. He stands between the raw event and the story people tell about it. He stands between the divine and the human with a pen, which is a surprisingly calm weapon, if you think about it. The gods can fight with spears and storms if they want, but the real power is often in the sentence that says what happened afterward. The record decides what becomes official. This is why Thoth appears in places where things need to be made legitimate. In many tales, when the gods argue, Thoth is the one who speaks carefully, who mediates, who writes, who makes the final agreement sound tidy. He is not dramatic about it. He is the type to solve a cosmic dispute the way someone solves an argument in a group chat, with one long message that begins, "Okay, so here's what we're going to do." It's also why he shows up in the afterlife, near scales and judgments, where truth is weighed with the delicacy of a feather. The heart sits on one side. Matt's feather sits on the other. The idea is simple. Are you balanced? Are you honest? Are you light enough to move forward? And as that scale holds its breath, Thoth is often there to record the result, which is such a quietly Egyptian detail. Even eternity needs documentation. Even the most spiritual moment of your existence gets written down. You can almost hear the pen scratch. You can almost smell the ink. If you're tired, let that image be gentle. Don't turn it into a threat. Think of it instead like a calm clerk in a quiet office, stamping papers with a soft sigh. The afterlife in this version is not chaos. It is an orderly place with clear procedures. You arrive. You are assessed. Your paperwork is filed. It's oddly soothing in the same way it's soothing to know where your keys are. Thoth's moonwork also touches the way Egypt handles days that don't fit. The calendar in many periods is made of tidy months that the year doesn't perfectly align with the sky. So there are extra days, a small handful set aside at the end. Days that feel like they're floating outside the usual system. They read like the strange 5 minutes at the end of a movie when the credits have started, but the music is still playing, and you're not sure if you're meant to leave. These extra days become mythic. They become a little dangerous, a little sacred, a little playful. And because Egypt loves a story that explains a practical problem, those extra days are sometimes tied to the births of major gods, Osiris, Isis, Seth, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder, depending on the version you're listening to. The year needed 5 extra days, so the myth says someone clever arranged 5 extra days. Someone clever, which is exactly the sort of job Thoth would take. The cleverness can be explained as strategy or as a kind of cosmic loophole. The sky has rules, and a god finds a way to bend them without breaking them. This is the gentle humor of Egyptian myth. The gods are powerful, yes, but they also work within systems. They negotiate, they compromise, they hack the calendar. It makes them feel weirdly relatable, like managers dealing with a scheduling conflict. Only the conflict is how to give birth without technically doing it within the forbidden time. You drift with this thought for a moment. A god solving problems with timing. A god creating space in the calendar the way you might create space in your evening by turning your phone face down. A small, quiet act of control. A ritual of making room. Now picture the everyday side of it, because Thoth isn't only for the temples. His presence leaks into ordinary life, like ink seeping into papyrus fibers. A scribe in a village might keep a small image of Thoth nearby, not because the scribe expects a thunderbolt of inspiration, but because writing is slow and mistakes are annoying and ink stains are forever. Thoth is the patron of the neat line, the correct number, the properly spelled name. If your job is counting grain, you want a god who respects counting. There's a certain sleepy comedy in imagining ancient accountants praying. May Thoth keep my totals accurate. May Thoth prevent me from forgetting a basket. May Thoth help my supervisor not notice that I spilled ink on the corner. These are not grand prayers. They are domestic. They are the kind of prayers that happen because people are tired and life is complicated, and even sacred offices have deadlines. You can let your mind meander into the texture of writing itself. Papyrus is not smooth like modern paper. It has a grain. It has a direction. The pen catches slightly if you move the wrong way. Writing becomes a physical activity, a tiny craft. Thoth, as a god of writing, is also a god of wrist muscles, patience, and the ability to sit still for a long time without making a dramatic fuss about it. In that sense, he is in Sem, our friendly deity. He would approve of slow pacing. He would approve of careful, repetitive actions. He would approve of the way your breathing becomes a rhythm that requires no explanation. And because myth is never far from daily habits, people might treat certain texts as protective by themselves, words written on amulets, names of gods inked onto linen, spells copied onto small strips and tucked close to the body. This is not just superstition. It's a worldview where language is active. To write a protective phrase is to place a small guard at the edge of your life. It's like leaving a nightlight on, except the nightlight is a sentence. Sometimes those sentences invoke Thoth directly, because he is the one who knows the right words. Sometimes they invoke Heka, the concept and god of magic itself, which Egypt treats like a force that can be handled responsibly, like fire in a brazier. But Thoth is the one who organizes the flame into a readable instruction. If magic is power, Thoth is the manual that tells you where to put your hands so you don't get burned. The moon keeps moving while all of this happens. It changes shape without asking anyone. It waxes, it wanes, it appears, it disappears. It's a reminder that time passes even when you're lying very still. And because people notice patterns, they build rituals around them. Certain nights are better for certain things. Certain temple festivals align with lunar phases. Some nights are for cleansing. Some nights are for asking questions. Some nights are for doing absolutely nothing except sleeping, which, if you ask me, should be honored as a ritual too. There's a kind of soft micro-hook tucked here, because ancient dream interpretation, the kind you listened to earlier, often overlaps with timekeeping. A dream has meaning, yes, but it also has timing. Did you dream it on a good night or a mixed day night? Did you dream it before dawn, when the mind is closer to waking? Did you dream it in the deep middle of the night, when the soul is supposedly wandering more freely? Egypt loves these small distinctions. It is like the universe has a customer service department and your dream came in with a timestamp. If you imagine Thoth reading those timestamps, he is not annoyed. He is interested. He likes details. He likes categories. If you dream of water, it matters whether the water is clear or muddy. If you dream of bread, it matters whether it is fresh or hard. The world is made of tiny differences, and Thoth, with his careful eyes, is a god who respects the difference between fresh and still technically edible. Now the scene shifts gently, like a lamp flame lowering. You find yourself in a temple space, not the dramatic, echoing kind from movies, but a quiet inner chamber where a priest moves slowly because the stone floor is cool and the air smells faintly of resin. The statue of Thoth is there in some form ibis-headed, holding a writing tool, or seated like a Vavan with an alert posture. Offerings are simple: bread, beer, maybe a small dish of milk. There is a practical tenderness to offerings in Egypt. Even gods get fed. Even cosmic intelligence appreciates a snack. The priest recites something soft and formulaic, a string of words that have been spoken so many times they feel like a worn path. The goal isn't to impress. The goal is to maintain. That's the thing about many Egyptian rituals. They are not performed because the world is on fire. They're performed because the world must continue not being on fire. The gods are kept content, the balance is maintained. The sun keeps rising, the Nile keeps moving, the calendar keeps behaving. Thoth, in this setting, is not an emergency deity. He is the deity of continuity. And continuity, when you're trying to sleep, is one of the sweetest ideas. The thought that things will proceed without you supervising them. The thought that the moon will wax and wane, even if you forget what day it is. The thought that somewhere in the mythic background, a god is calmly checking the ledgers so you can turn your attention inward and soften. There's also a gentle irony here. Humans want certainty, and they build systems, calendars, omens, dream books to make uncertainty feel smaller. But the systems themselves require interpretation. Someone has to read them. Someone has to decide what a sign means. Someone has to say whether this is a good day or simply a less bad day. So the comfort of the system creates a role for the interpreter, and the interpreter becomes part of the comfort. Thoth, as divine interpreter and record keeper, sits in the center of that loop. He is the reason the system feels reliable, and he is also the reason you need the system at all. If you're smiling a little, keep it soft. Like you're smiling in your sleep and no one has to know. There's no need to wake up to enjoy the joke. Now, drift again, back to the quieter domestic world. The house, the desk, the palette, the moonlight slipping through a small opening. You can imagine a tired person rolling up a scroll and tying it with a strip of linen, because even ancient texts prefer to be kept tidy. They blow gently on the ink to dry it, not in a dramatic way, just a small breath, like you breathe now. Breath in, slow. Breath out, slower. The world doesn't need your urgency. It only needs your presence, and even that can be minimal. There's a final kind of bedtime lesson hiding under Thoth's entire personality. It's that not everything has to be solved loudly. Not everything needs a conclusion. Some things are simply recorded, understood a little, and left to rest. You can think of your own thoughts like that. You don't have to fight them. You can label them gently, the way a scribe labels a jar: worry, memory, plan, question. You can set them on a shelf. You can tell yourself you'll open them in the morning if they're still relevant. Thoth would respect that method. It's basically his whole brand. Outside, the Nile keeps its slow, glossy movement. The moon keeps its patient shifting. In some distant mythic place, Ra's night boat continues on its route through the darkness. And if you like, you can imagine Thoth noting the time, not because he doubts the sun, but because order is comforting. The lamp in the room grows smaller. The inkwells sit like two quiet eyes. The reed pen rests. The papyrus fibers relax. And your mind, which has been working all day at being a mind, is finally allowed to stop producing results. If a dream comes, let it come. If it is strange, let it be strange. If it is vivid, let it pass like a bird crossing the moon. You don't have to decode it right now. You don't have to consult any scroll. You can let meaning wait in another jar, lightly sealed, never forced. The night will keep speaking in pictures, whether you listen closely or drift away. And somewhere in the calm background of old stories, Thoth keeps his quiet ledger, writing without hurry, as if the universe itself can afford to be gentle, and you can too. In the dream book, the night is not treated like a wild animal you have to chase through reeds. It is treated like a text you can turn over in your hands slowly until it shows you where the seams are. That's the quietly shocking part if you think about it for too long. Not that people dreamed, because everyone dreams, even the most serious priest who insists he does not. The strange part is the confidence that a dream can be sorted, that a dream can be broken down into pieces, like bread on a small plate, and each piece can be given a label, like a jar in a pantry. You saw a crocodile. You tasted beer. You lost a tooth. You found a ring. You stood in water that was too cold for the season. Each image becomes an item, and the night becomes an inventory. If your eyes feel heavy, let them be heavy. If your thoughts feel cluttered, let them sit where they are. This is one of those stories where nothing needs to happen fast. The dream book does not sprint. It doesn't chase you. It simply waits like a scroll beside a bed, confident that eventually someone will unroll it and ask softly, "What was that about?" Imagine the papyrus itself for a moment, how it holds ink in its fibers, how it prefers straight lines, how it almost encourages order. A dream, when you're inside it, feels like a room with too many doors. But a dream, when you write it down, becomes a hallway. It becomes something with edges. And once it has edges, the mind can do what it loves to do most, make categories. Ancient Egypt was very good at categories, not in a loud, academic way, in a quiet, practical way. The way you might sort your clothes into piles because tomorrow exists and you would like tomorrow to be easier. So the dream book treats images as words and dreams as sentences. It's not poetry, not really. It's closer to a manual. If you dream of a snake, the book does not say, the winding mystery of the soul. It says something more like, snake, watch out for an enemy, or snake, good fortune, depending on which snake, what it did, and whether the tradition is feeling contrary that day. It can be blunt in a way that is almost funny, like a friend who refuses to overcomplicate things. You bring them a confusing problem and they say, "Yeah, no, that's just your boss." The dream book has that energy sometimes, except the boss is an enemy, and the office is the Nile Valley, and the email is delivered by the moon. A lot of the symbols are ordinary because life is ordinary. People dream of food because they eat. People dream of animals because animals share their world. People dream of water because water is the center of everything, and also because the human brain seems to enjoy reusing water as a metaphor until the end of time. Bread, beer, fish, dates, cattle, snakes, birds, tea, clothing, boats, doors. Fire, these aren't exotic items in a museum. They are objects you can touch. They are the kind of things you would see in a market, or in a yard, or in a kitchen where the day's heat still clings to the walls. And the dream book turns that ordinary world into a vocabulary. It's almost like the night has its own language, and Egypt decided to write a dictionary for it. Not because they were bored, although boredom can be very productive, but because uncertainty is uncomfortable, and a dictionary is a cozy object. A dictionary says, this can be translated. It doesn't promise happiness. It just promises comprehension. And comprehension at 3 a.m. can feel like a warm cup held between both hands. The entries themselves often behave like little equations. If you see this, then that. If you do this in the dream, then that will happen in waking life. Sometimes it's moral. Sometimes it's social. Sometimes it's practical in a way that makes you blink. You dream of finding bread and the book says wealth. You dream of eating something unpleasant and the book warns of sickness. You dream of having sex and the book gives you an outcome that might be about status or conflict or fertility. or depending on the tradition, something surprisingly unrelated, because dreams in these books are not shy about swerving into strange logic with a straight face. There is a particular dry humor hiding in this because the dream book treats the unconscious like it's running a customer support hotline. You call in by dreaming, and the book answers with a prepared script. Thank you for contacting the night. If you have dreamed of crocodiles, press 1. If you have dreamed of teeth, press 2. Please have your offering bread ready. It's absurd, but it's also soothing, because a script means someone has done this before. Someone else has woken up with their heart beating strangely, remembering a dream that felt too vivid, and they have also wanted to know whether it meant anything at all. The dream book is a record of shared anxiety organized into neat lines. Now, if you let yourself drift deeper into the grammar idea, you can almost see how the mind becomes a scribe. A dream isn't one image, it's a chain, it's a sequence of signs. A snake beside water is not the same as a snake beside bread. A boat that moves is not the same as a boat that sinks. A tooth that falls out is not the same as a tooth that is pulled. In the dream book, these details are not decoration. They're the difference between two words that sound similar but mean different things, like desert and dessert, except the consequences are more ancient and involve more incense. So the grammar isn't only what you see, it's how it behaves. Is the animal calm or attacking? Is the water clear or muddy? Is the bread fresh or stale? Is the fire contained or spreading? Is the door open or locked? The night, in this view, is a set of tiny verbs attached to tiny nouns. And the interpreter, the scribe, the priest, the experienced elder with a face that has seen too many confusing dreams becomes someone who can parse the sentence. Someone who can say, this is the subject. This is the action. This is the hidden implication. And that gives a certain kind of power, the sort that doesn't sparkle but still changes the air in a room. Because if the dream is a message, someone has to read it. And if someone can read it, someone can also shape how you respond to it. A dream book, then, isn't only about prophecy. It's about authority. It's about who gets to tell you what your own brain is doing at night. That's a delicate thing when you think about it, and Egypt handled it with an almost casual confidence. Like, yes, of course, dreams can be indexed. Of course they can. Now past the ink, you can picture the interpreter sitting close to the lamp, eyes tired but focused, listening to someone describe a dream in fragments. People don't tell dreams neatly. They say, there was water. No, wait, there was a bird. And I was running, but not running. And my mother was there, but she wasn't my mother. The interpreter's job is to pull the thread out of the tangle and lay it straight. The dream book helps by offering categories. It says, focus on the bird, focus on the water, focus on the action. Don't get lost in the emotional fog. It's the same advice modern people sometimes give each other, just wrapped in older symbols and delivered in the patient tone of papyrus. And the symbols themselves can be strangely consistent in their themes. Water is often change, movement, risk, cleansing, travel, because water in Egypt is all of those things. It gives life, but it also floods. It carries boats, but it also swallows them. It makes fields rich, but it can also turn a path into mud. So water in a dream is never just water. It's the whole personality of the Nile, condensed into one image. If the water is clear, that personality is friendly. If the water is muddy, it's moody. If the water is rising, it's dramatic in the slow way only rivers can be dramatic. Animals carry their own grammar too. A snake is not just an animal. It's danger, protection, royalty, healing, depending on context. In Egypt, snakes live in the real world and the mythic world at the same time. They are in the grass, but they are also in the sun, God's path at night. They are on crowns, but they are also in nightmares. So when a dream book says snake, it isn't offering you one meaning. It's offering you a whole shelf of possible meanings, and it expects the interpreter to choose the correct jar. Birds can be messages, souls, travel, good news, or annoyingly loud neighbors, because birds are also that. A goose in a dream could be a symbol, yes, but it could also be your brain remembering that geese exist and are not subtle. Fish can be abundance because fish are food, but they can also be a sign of something hidden because fish live under surfaces. Teeth can be family trouble, aging, loss, anxiety, or a reminder to stop grinding your jaw in your sleep, like you retrying to chew through your own thoughts. The dream book doesn't care why you grind your jaw, it just notes the teeth. And then there are the human-made objects, which are almost more interesting, because they show how Egypt's daily routines seep into the night. A boat is never just transportation. It's status, movement, passage, sometimes even a miniature echo of Ra's solar bark, because in Egypt everything eventually echoes the sun if you wait long enough. A door is a threshold. A bed is not just furniture. It's vulnerability. Clothing is identity. A ring is binding, contract, promise. Bread is stability. Beer is not only pleasure, it's nourishment, offering, social glue, a soft cushion for the edges of life. If you dreamed of beer, the book might treat it as a sign the same way it treats water, except with a friendlier mood and more grain involved. And yes, the dream book can be blunt about good and bad, which is a very human habit. We like to sort things into helpful piles. We like to decide whether we should relax or prepare. The night becomes a marketplace of omens, and the dream book becomes the price list. This dream costs you worry. That dream earns you confidence. That dream means you should give an offering. That dream means you should avoid certain actions until the day cools down, which is such a tender phrase, really. A day cooling down, as if time itself can be too hot to touch, and you should wait until it's safe. But even within that bluntness, there's a softness, because the dream book is not always fatalistic. A bad dream isn't always a sentence. Often it's a warning, which is strangely kind. It's like a sign on a road, bridge out. The sign isn't the bridge. It's just information. And information in Egypt can be turned into action. If you know the day might be sharp, you can move through it gently. You can do small protective things. You can keep your words careful. You can make your morning quieter. You can, as the dream book quietly suggests, treat fear like something you can manage with routine. There's another micro hook here. Sometimes the dream book treats opposites as meaningful. It plays with inversion. You dream of something that looks pleasant and it warns you. You dream of something that looks frightening and it reassures you. It's like the night is a mirror that flips things. And Egypt learned to read the mirror without trusting the first glance. That's a very sleepy kind of wisdom, actually. Not everything that feels urgent is urgent. Not everything that feels dangerous is dangerous. Sometimes the mind is just showing you a picture to see how you react, like it's testing your nervous system the way a priest tests a lamp wick gently to see if it still catches. And because the book can invert meanings, the interpreter remains important. You can't simply look at your dream and decide. You need someone who knows the tradition, someone who knows how the symbols behave in that specific local language of meaning. It's a little like needing subtitles, even though you technically speak the language. You understand the words, but you don't understand the idioms. The dream book is full of idioms. So if you imagine a sleepy household in ancient Egypt, it might look like this. A person wakes early, the air is still cool, the lamp barely alive. They sit up slowly because waking is a small ritual too. They remember a dream, not the whole thing, just pieces. A snake, a river, a basket of bread, a door that wouldn't open. Their heart makes that small, uncomfortable jump that hearts make when the mind thinks, this might matter. And then they do something very human. They tell someone. They speak it into the room, because a dream held inside the body feels heavier than a dream spoken out loud. And when it's spoken, it becomes a thing that can be handled. It becomes a story. It becomes an entry. It becomes if the household is connected to a temple or to someone who can read a case. Not a dramatic case with judges and shouting. A quiet case, like a minor issue you take to someone who knows how to fix things. I dreamed of this, you say, and the interpreter nods, as if you have brought them a broken jar. All right, they say, let's see what this means. You can almost see the dream book unrolling. The papyrus makes that soft sound like dry leaves. The interpreter's finger traces lines. They look for the keyword: snake, water, bread, door. They consider the grammar. They consider whether the dream was about danger or about protection, because in Egypt those two are often neighbors. They consider whether the dream took place in a house or outside, because location matters too. A house is safety. Outside is exposure. A dream that happens in a temple is different again, because temples and dreams are not just buildings. They are zones of heightened meaning, like stepping into a place where symbols are louder. And then the interpreter gives an answer, not as a thunderbolt, but as a suggestion. Maybe you should make a small offering. Maybe you should avoid a certain kind of argument today. Maybe you should clean yourself with water and speak protective words. Maybe you should simply be aware. The dream book isn't always trying to frighten you. It's trying to teach you how to move through uncertainty without panicking, which is, honestly, one of the most useful life skills imaginable. And if you're listening now and feeling yourself drift, you can take that same approach. Let your own images, thoughts, worries, plans be treated like symbols that can be noted without being obeyed. You can say, there is the worry about tomorrow. You can say, there is the memory that keeps showing up. You can say, there is the random snake of anxiety. And you can let them be cataloged without giving them the power to start a fire in your chest. The dream book's secret kindness is that it turns fear into a manageable object. It says, here is the sign. Here's the response. Keep it small. Keep it practical. Somewhere outside this imagined room, the night continues its gentle schedule. The moon keeps sliding through its phases, and Thoth patient as ever keeps his quiet accounting, making sure time remains readable. In another part of the mythic landscape, Ra's boat continues its nightly route, not in a thrilling way, but in a reliable way. Like public transportation that actually arrives when it says it will. The world is held together by routines more than by drama. A dream book is one of those routines. A small manual for nights that feel too full of meaning and days that feel too fragile without instructions. So let the papyrus rest again. Let the ink settle into its fibers. Let the categories be there, not as a prison, but as a soft shelf. The grammar of symbols doesn't have to be solved tonight. It can simply exist, like a quiet language spoken in the background of human life. And as you breathe, slowly, you can let your own mind loosen its grip on interpretation, because sleep does not require you to understand everything. Sleep only asks that you soften, that you let the night speak in pictures if it wants to, that you let those pictures drift by like boats passing in the dark, carrying their cargo without needing you to count every basket. There's something quietly comforting about the idea that your sleeping mind can be read like a note left on a table. Not a dramatic note, not the kind that flips your whole life. Just a small, slightly smudged message written in pictures with the same humble energy as a grocery list. Bread, water, a snake, a door that won't open, a fish that slips away, a tooth that appears in your hand as if your body is doing late night accounting. The most surprising part is not that the night produces these images. The surprising part is that someone, long ago, decided to treat them as readable, as if the darkness had grammar. As if your brain, when it finally stops pretending to be in control, still wants to communicate in a tidy way. And if you're listening from a bed or a couch, or somewhere in between those two states, you can let your shoulders sink a little. You can let your face soften. You don't need to solve anything right now. You only need to drift alongside the idea that Egypt with all its lamps, and reed pens and very patient scribes tried to make the night feel less wild by giving it an index. That is a strangely gentle ambition, a night manual. A guide for the part of you that's awake enough to worry, but tired enough to believe in signs. It's easy to imagine how a dream book would travel through time the way a good household trick travels through a neighborhood. Someone says, try this. It helps, not in a mystical, thunderous way. In a practical way, like telling someone to put a damp cloth on a hot forehead, or to store grain a certain way, or to tie a knot in a string so you don't forget something important. A dream manual is basically a knot in a string for the mind. The mind dreams, panics a little, then forgets. The manual says, no, tie the knot, remember it, label it. Do something small with it, then go back to your life, because the dream book is not only about meaning, it's about containment. It takes something slippery images that dissolve the moment you wake, and it gives them a container. Papyrus, ink, a spoken retelling, a line in a list. It turns a feeling into an object, and once it's an object, you can hold it at arm's length. You can look at it without drowning in it. You can ask someone else to look at it with you, which is one of the oldest calming techniques on earth. Sharing the strange thing with another person so it becomes less heavy inside your own chest. In that sense, the dream book is less like prophecy and more like a coping system, a soft technology. It's the ancient version of writing something down so your brain stops looping it. It's the night's version of a planner, not the overly ambitious planner that assumes you will become a new person by Thursday. More like a simple one that says, here are the days. Here are the signs. Here is what people tend to do when they feel uncertain. And uncertainty in Egypt was not an abstract philosophical hobby. It was a daily companion. The flood might come early or late. A child might get sick. A trip might be safe or not. A harvest might be generous or stingy. Even the most confident person still lived under a sky that could change its mood. So a manual that promises translation, however imperfect, becomes popular for the same reason any manual becomes popular. It reduces the feeling of being helpless. It replaces helplessness with procedure. Not certainty, exactly. Procedure. And procedure is soothing. Procedure says, do this first, then this. Even if the universe is unpredictable, your response can be predictable. You can wash. You can burn incense. You can speak protective words. You can make an offering. You can avoid certain actions until the day feels less sharp. You can behave as if you have a small lever, even if the lever is mostly symbolic. And symbols matter because humans are symbolic animals. We love a small lever. We love a button to press. We love the idea that if we do the right tiny thing, the huge unknowable system might soften its edges. The dream book gives you those tiny things without asking you to become a saint. It doesn't demand perfection. It offers maintenance. It offers the spiritual equivalent of tightening a loose hinge before the door becomes a problem. It also spreads because it's wonderfully shareable. Dreams are a social currency. People tell dreams the way they tell weather. Last night I dreamed of water. Last night I dreamed of snakes. Last night I dreamed my teeth fell out, which honestly has been scaring humans since humans first had teeth. And when people share dreams, they also share interpretations. And when interpretations are shared, they get repeated. And when they get repeated, they start to feel like tradition. That's how it goes. A dream book is a formal version of the conversation people have anyway, just written down with more confidence and better handwriting. Also, a dream book has that irresistible quality of being both personal and impersonal at the same time. Your dream feels intimate. It feels like it belongs only to you, like your mind is showing you its private theater. But the book treats your dream like an entry on a shelf that thousands of people could also access. Snake, this. Water, that. Tooth, this other thing. There is a strange relief in that. It's like being told gently, You are not the first person whose mind did something weird. You are not special in your anxiety. You are human. Your brain is doing the very normal human habit of turning feelings into images. The dream book, in its dry way, normalizes your strangeness. And it's not hard to imagine the physical scene of how this becomes part of life. A household wakes, the lamp is low. The air is still cool. Someone remembers a dream and says it out loud, partly because speaking it makes it less sticky. Maybe they speak to a spouse, maybe to a mother, maybe to a neighbor who always seems to know the right protective phrase. Maybe to a midwife who has heard everything and therefore isn't impressed. And then, if the dream feels bad, they do not spiral. They do not spend the whole day trembling. They do something modest. They wash their hands. They sweep the threshold. They burn a pinch of incense. They tie a knot in a cord. They touch an amulet. They speak a name. They make the response small and repeatable. That's one of the dream book's hidden lessons. Keep your response small. Don't turn the dream into a monster. Don't make it bigger than the day can hold. Treat it like weather. If clouds gather, you don't sue the sky. You adjust. You carry shade. You move slowly. You do not panic. In a world where panic solves nothing, small adjustments become a kind of wisdom. The temples, too, fit into this system like clinics for the anxious. Not clinics in the modern sterile sense. More like places that specialize in clarity. If a dream feels serious, you might bring it to the temple the way you bring a strange pain to someone who knows the body. Priests in this role are not only ritual specialists, they are interpreters of uncertainty. They can frame a dream within mapped order, balance, proper proportion so that the dream becomes less like chaos and more like instruction. And even that framing is soothing. It turns something is wrong into here is a step. And if you're still awake right now, at whatever hour you happen to be listening, you can keep that in mind the next time your thoughts start acting like a dream book all on their own. If you want to subscribe, you can quietly, gently, like placing a small offering on a shelf and walking away. And if you don't, that's also fine. The Nile does not take attendance. It just keeps moving. You can let the thought float downstream without needing to catch it. There's also a second reason the dream manual goes viral, if we can borrow a modern phrase without waking it up too much. It goes viral because it's a catalog of what people fear and hope for. When you read the types of dreams that get recorded, you're not only reading interpretations, you're reading priorities, illness, betrayal, fertility, food, status, safe travel, family conflict, wealth, reputation. The dream book becomes a quiet mirror of human life because the symbols that matter are the ones tied to survival and belonging. Even the strangest entries often point back to basic needs: safety, stability, love, enough bread, enough water, enough peace to sleep. So the manual survives because humans keep having those same needs. The objects change. Someone might dream of a modern log instead of a wooden one, or of a train instead of a boat, but the emotional grammar stays. The mind still tries to speak in pictures. People still wake and wonder, was that a warning? And they still look for a system that makes the wonder less sharp. This is where the dream book becomes almost tender in its humility. It does not claim to control the gods. It doesn't claim to guarantee outcomes. It simply offers translation. It offers a way to respond that feels respectful to the unseen. And respect in Egypt is a practical posture. You respect the river by not pretending it cannot flood. You respect the sun by not pretending it will rise without its daily work. You respect the gods by maintaining rituals, not because the gods are petty, but because rituals make life feel coherent. In that way, the dream book is less about prediction and more about relationship. The relationship between human and uncertainty. The relationship between the visible and the invisible. The relationship between what you can control, your actions, your words, your small routines, and what you cannot. And the book quietly insists that focusing on what you can control is the path to calm. Even if the calm is temporary, even if the calm is just enough to let you finish your bread, drink your water, and move into the day without trembling. The funniest part, in a gentle way, is that the dream book also makes the interpreter important, because the system has rules, and rules create specialists. If meanings can flip, if something frightening can be good and something pleasant can be bad, then you need someone who knows when the mirror flips. You need someone who can say, yes, I know you think this means disaster, but the book says it can mean long life, which is a very Egyptian twist. Even death in a dream can be interpreted as longevity, like the night is playing an inside joke with the universe. This inversion keeps the interpreter employed, which is not a scandal. It's simply how systems work. A system that's too simple doesn't need caretakers. A system that's slightly complicated becomes a profession. And there is a sleepy truth there too. You don't always trust your first reaction. The dream book teaches you to pause, to consult, to consider context, to doubt the immediate panic. That is a surprisingly modern skill, delivered through ancient symbols. It's the mental equivalent of waiting a minute before replying to a message that irritated you. The dream book says, hold on, let's look at the entry. Let's see if your instinct is accurate. It turns impulse into interpretation. And interpretation is slower, and slowness is calming. Now, if we let the story drift toward its softer underlayer, the secret under the system is not really secret at all. It's simply this. Humans want the night to be usable. We want sleep to be restful, but we also want sleep to be meaningful. We want the mind to shut off, but we also want it to give us guidance. We want silence, but we also want reassurance. A dream manual offers a compromise. It says you can sleep and still feel like you're receiving information. It says your mind can be out of your control, but it can still be translated into something that fits inside your day. That's why it persists. Not because every interpretation is true in any measurable way, but because the experience of having an interpretation is soothing. It turns raw experience into narrative. It turns the chaos of images into a sentence, and humans live on sentences. We live on stories we tell ourselves about what happens and why. So when you look at the dream book as a whole, its blunt labels, its strange inversions, its tidy categories, it starts to feel less like prophecy and more like a ritual for anxiety. A way to take the unknown and give it edges. A way to keep the night from spilling into the day too messily. A way to make the next morning manageable. And that's a beautiful thing in a quiet, boring way. Boring because it's maintenance. Beautiful because maintenance is love for the future. And maybe that as the best bedtime oath hidden in all of this. Keep the dream in one jar and keep the meaning in another. Let the images exist without forcing them to rule you. If the dream felt sharp, respond gently. If it felt heavy, respond practically. Drink water, wash your face. Speak a small protective phrase. Touch something familiar. Do not worship the fear. Do not give it extra room in the house. Let the dream be a visitor, not a landlord. You can even imagine yourself doing what an Egyptian household might do, not as a reenactment, but as a mood. You place your worries down like offerings, not because a god demands them, but because your hands are tired of holding them. You let the mind stop gripping the symbols. You let the night speak in pictures if it wants to, and you let the day handle what the day can handle. Somewhere in the background of this imagined world, Thoth continues his patient work, counting and recording, not because he's obsessed with paperwork, though he might be just a little, but because record keeping is another form of calm. Somewhere Matt's feather stays light, not as a threat, but as a reminder that balance is a real thing you can practice in small choices. Somewhere Ra's boat continues its route through the night in a reliable, almost boring schedule, like a ferry that never misses its crossing. The cosmic machine runs on routine, and routine is not glamorous. It's just steady. And if you're listening now, you can borrow that steadiness. You can let your breathing become the simplest ritual of all. In, slow, out, slower. You don't have to decode anything tonight. You don't have to chase meaning through reeds. You can let the dream book close itself for now. Papyrus fibers relaxing, ink resting, the lamp dimming without complaint. The night can keep speaking in pictures, and you can keep floating beside it, half awake, half dreaming, letting every symbol drift by like a boat. You don't need to board, letting every meaning sit quietly on its shelf, and letting sleep arrive when it's ready, as if it has always been on schedule and simply took the long way home. A bad dream in Egypt was not usually treated like a prophecy carved into stone. It was treated more like a spell. Something inconvenient that happened in the night. Something sticky that might stain the morning if you just stare at it and do nothing. And the first comfort is that you do not have to wrestle it into meaning while your eyes are still gritty with sleep. You can treat it the way you treat heat. You manage it. You find shade. You slow down. You do not argue with the sun. You simply shift your body into the small practical steps that make life feel possible again. So imagine you wake with that thin, unpleasant feeling that a dream can leave behind, like you've been chewing on sand in your sleep. The room is ordinary. A woven mat, a low lamp, a cooling jar of water that did its best through the night. Maybe there's a little bowl of natron nearby, because natron is the kind of thing you keep around in Egypt the way someone today keeps soap and salt in a spare battery. It does many jobs. It cleans. It dries. It makes things feel orderly again. If your dream felt sour, if it left a taste like metal in the back of your mind, you can sit up slowly and wash your hands as if you re-rinsing away the last clean threads of it. Not because water is magic, though water is always a little bit magic, but because your body understands washing in a way your anxious thoughts do not. Your body hears, we're safe enough to do small things. That message, delivered through cool water, is surprisingly effective, and you do it without drama. No grand gestures. No rushing through the house, waking everyone like you've just received a divine subpoena. This is the sleepy genius of the system. Keep your response small. Breathe in 4, out 6, and let the air do its quiet work. In Egypt, even the gods appreciated a measured pace. Ra had a whole schedule. After all boat by day, boat by night. Same route, same steady rhythm. The cosmos ran on routine. You can borrow that. You can make your own tiny schedule. Wake, drink, wash, speak, write, return to calm. Not glamorous. Not heroic. Just functional. Like repairing a loose strap before it snaps. The first repair might be something as simple as words said under your breath. The Egyptians loved words that did jobs. Not words that decorate. Words that protect. Words that close a door. Words that draw a line around you like a fence that doesn't look impressive but keeps the goats from wandering off. A short phrase, an address to a household god. A little request that basically means, please don't let that dream follow me around today like a bored dog. And if that sounds modern, it is only because humans are consistent creatures. We have always wanted the invisible to behave politely. Sometimes the repair is smoke. Not the dramatic smoke of battle or fire, just a thin ribbon of incense curling upward like a quiet reminder that air is allowed to change. Incense in Egypt is not only perfume for gods. It's also the scent of, we have handled this. You burn a pinch, you wave it near the doorway, you let it drift into the corners where the night likes to linger. Corners are suspicious in any century. They collect dust, secrets, and the last mood of the room. Smoke makes corners feel less confident. It tells them, gently, that they are being noticed. If the dream was particularly unpleasant, say, you dreamed of a snake in the bed, or of teeth crumbling like chalk, or of water rising in a room where it shouldn't, then the response might involve an object you can hold. Because fear, when it stays inside the body, feels too large. But fear, when it becomes an object, becomes manageable. This is why amulets were everywhere. A little eye of Horus, glossy and blue-green like river water, turned into stone. A small Bez figure with her squat body and his unapologetic face, as if to say, yes, I look ridiculous. No, I do not care. I am here to guard your sleep. A Tauret amulet with her heavy hippo belly and crocodile back. The kind of protective energy that does not whisper it stands there and takes up space. Space is especially perfect for nights like this. He is the household protector who looks like he should be printed on a jar of something useful. He is not elegant. He does not float. He does not pose like a temple statue. He grimaces. He stares. He sticks out his tongue at whatever threatens you, which is a delightful strategy because it implies the threat can be embarrassed. If your dream made you feel small, Bess makes the danger feel small. He turns terror into something you can laugh at quietly, in that dry way that doesn't wake you up. A god who protects children and mothers and sleepers by being mildly rude is honestly the kind of mythological customer service we all deserve. And sometimes the repair is a knot and a cord, tied and untied, tied and untied, the fingers making a small loop of control. Knots are humble spells. They don't require a priest, they don't require a temple, they require hands and patience. If the dream suggested something bound or trapped or slipping away, you answer with binding in miniature one knot that says, I can tie things down. Or you answer with unbinding one knot loosened that says, I can let things go. The dream book, in all its bluntness, teaches you this rhythm. Image appears, action responds. The image doesn't own you. You answer it with something small and steady. The second comfort is that the dream can be moved out of your body and into the world. You can write it down. This seems obvious now, but it is still one of the most soothing technologies humans have ever invented. A dream inside the mind is like a fish in water hard to grasp, always moving. A dream on papyrus is like a fish on a plate. Still strange, still a little slippery, but you can look at it without chasing it. The reed pen scratches. The ink sits where you put it. The dream becomes a thing with edges. It becomes a problem you can manage with routine, rather than a feeling that manages you. If you picture the act, it's very calm. The lamp is low. The papyrus fibers are visible if you look closely, like tiny reeds flattened into order. The writer is not rushing. They are not composing poetry. They are doing triage, snake, water, bread, fire, teeth. A locked door, an empty jar, a face that won't speak. The dream book style is practical, almost blunt, like someone cataloging symptoms. It's not romantic, it's useful. The goal is not to be impressed by the dream. The goal is to place it on a shelf in your mind where it can stop shouting. And the dream book's rules can be strangely calming because they're so unapologetically specific. One image can mean wealth. Another can mean sickness. Another can mean enemy's attention, which is such a polite phrase for something that sounds like it would ruin your day. Enemy's attention has the energy of an unwanted notification, the kind that pops up while you're trying to live your life. And if the dream book says the meaning flips, if what looks frightening can be good, and what looks pleasant can be bad, then you are forced to slow down. You cannot trust your first panic. You must consult. You must sit with uncertainty like a cat in your lap. You don't jolt. You don't fling it off. You just breathe and wait for it to settle. This is where the interpreter becomes important, and the dream book becomes a kind of social power. Not everyone reads papyrus. Not everyone has the leisure or training to keep a manual beside the bed. So the person who can interpret dreams becomes quietly a professional calmer, a translator between your stomach-clenching image and your daylight decisions. Sometimes that translator is a priest, sometimes a scribe, sometimes an elder who has simply lived long enough to know that dreams are dramatic, but mornings still need bread. And the translator's greatest skill is not knowledge, it's tone. The ability to say, yes, that sounds unpleasant, without adding fuel. The ability to keep the dream in its jar. If the dream felt like a warning, the response might be a small offering. Not a desperate bribe, more like maintenance, bread, beer, a little oil, incense. The offering is ordinary because the point is not extravagance. The point is to align yourself with order again, to say, I have noticed the imbalance. Here is my small act of respect. It's almost like paying a tiny fee to keep the road smooth. Not because the gods are petty toll collectors, but because humans feel better when they have completed a gesture. A completed gesture is a closed loop, and closed loops help the mind relax. Sometimes, too, the repair is avoidance. Very gentle avoidance. If the dream book suggests that a certain action would be unwise that day, you don't fight it. You simply adjust. You delay a trip. You stay closer to home. You avoid a particular canal crossing. You don't start a new argument. You don't sign something important in a hurry. You treat the day like it has a slightly strange wind, and you walk accordingly. This is not superstition so much as a strategy for anxiety. If your mind is unsettled, you keep your movements smaller. You give yourself fewer chances to spiral. You let the day be quiet on purpose. And there's humor hiding in these repairs if you look at them sideways. The idea of cooling down. A dream is funny because it treats the mind like a cooking pot. Too hot, simmering, bubbling with images, so you take it off the fire and let it rest. You wash. You burn incense. You tie a knot. You consult an amulet. It's basically a domestic routine for the invisible. The same way you tidy a room after guests leave. You tidy your inner space after the dream leaves. Sweep the threshold. Set the lamp right. Make sure nothing strange is hiding behind the jar. And the dream book, being honest, does not pretend that these repairs remove uncertainty forever. They only make it manageable. That's why the response is repeated. Daily maintenance. Like brushing teeth, except for the soul. Like sealing a jar, except the jar holds your worry. This is why the system is so sleep-friendly. It does not demand emotional fireworks. It demands small repetition. It demands the kind of effort you can do even when tired. If you drift a little deeper into the household scene, you might notice how birth and sleep and protection are braided together in Egyptian life. The same gods who guard the cradle often guard the bed. Tawret, with her solid presence, stands near the threshold in amulet form. Base makes faces at the dark. The Eye of Horus watches, not like a spy, but like a friendly alarm system. Even Mati's feather, that quiet emblem of balance, hovers in the background as a reminder that order is not a one-time achievement. It's a practice. You don't have mat like you own a jar. You keep mat like you keep a lamp lit, steady, modest, tended. So after a bad dream, you might simply add one more small act of balance, a kind word to someone in the house, a bit of extra patience, a slower pace. Because the dream book is not only about symbols, it's about behavior. It teaches you to respond rather than react. It teaches you that panic is not a ritual, and you don't have to perform it. You can perform something else, something quieter. There's also a tender trick in the practice of speaking the dream aloud. When you say the dream to someone else, you also hear yourself. You hear the shape of it. Often it sounds less powerful when it's spoken. A snake in the bed becomes a sentence. Teeth crumbling becomes a sentence. Water rising becomes a sentence. And sentences can be handled. Sentences can be answered. The dream becomes less like a god and more like a visitor. And visitors, even annoying ones, eventually leave. Sometimes the best repair is simply returning the dream to the night, as if you're handing it back like a borrowed tool. You might stand at the threshold, the place Egypt always treated with respect, and speak a few words to keep the inside and outside properly separated. The threshold is where you decide what enters. It's where you decide what stays out. It's the line between your woven mat and the vast unpredictable world. And a bad dream, in this logic, is something that tried to cross the line. You politely escort it back, not with force. With procedure. If you're listening now, you can let this become your own small ritual, even without papyrus and incense and amulets. You can imagine placing the dream, any dream, even the vague ones, into a jar with a lid. You don't have to smash the jar. You don't have to label it perfectly. You simply set it down. The important part is that it is no longer pressed against your ribs. It is now an object in the room of your mind, and the room has space again, because the truth underneath all these repairs is simple. Sleep is precious. The Egyptians knew that. They treated sleep as a place where gods could speak, yes, but also as a place that needed guarding. They understood that the night can be busy, and that busy nights require gentle mornings. So the response to a bad dream becomes, ultimately, an act of kindness toward yourself and your household. A decision to keep the day livable. A decision not to let the night pick a fight with the sun. And you don't have to finish the story. You don't have to reach a conclusion where the dream is solved. The dream book itself is a system that can go on forever, because dreams go on forever. The night keeps producing images. People keep waking. People keep washing their hands, tying knots, touching small amulets, speaking small words, writing down what needs to be moved from the body into the page. The lamp dims. The room stays ordinary. The jar of water stays cool. The protective eye keeps watching in its calm, patient way. And you too can let your mind drift back toward softness, not because everything is explained, but because you have remembered the oldest comfort of all. If something feels too large, you make your response small, steady and repeatable, and you let that steadiness carry you quietly back into sleep. You might not expect the moon to be one of the most quietly organized things in ancient Egypt, but it really tries. It shows up, it changes shape with a steady patience, and it gives people something to point at when they read too tired to argue about what day it is. And somewhere along the Nile, while the city settles into softer sounds, there is a temple that treats the night the way a careful person treats a kitchen after dinner. Nothing dramatic. Just small routines, a few items placed back where they belong. A lamp checked, a lid set on a jar. The moon does not roar, it clocks in. So imagine you are walking toward a temple courtyard at the hour when heat finally loosens its grip. The stone has stopped fighting the air. The shadows get longer, but not in a scary way, more like a slow blanket being pulled up over the shoulders of the town. A thin smell of oil lamps hangs around the edges, and if you listen closely, you can hear the tiny language of evening, a reed mat shifting, a clay cup set down, a distant donkey having an opinion about bedtime. The moon, still low, is not trying to impress anyone. It's pale, practical. It looks like a tool, not a decoration. Inside the temple, this is the hour when the gods become less like public statues and more like private habits. The daytime gods have done their bright jobs. Ra has been dragged, politely and relentlessly, across the sky like a heavy piece of furniture that must be moved every day whether anyone is in the mood or not. Now the night gods take over in the gentle way night always takes over, by replacing sharp light with soft light, by letting the world become less detailed and more manageable. And if you follow the quieter corridors, past columns that still hold the day's warmth, you begin to understand something strangely comforting. Egypt's night is not only mystery, it's maintenance. There's a particular kind of sacred work that happens when most people are sleeping. It is not the kind that gets carved into heroic scenes. No one builds a triumphal arch to celebrate successfully tracked the moon again, but it matters because the moon is a clock you can see. It tells you when to count, when to plan, when to hold a festival, when to begin a fast, when to do a ritual at exactly the right time, so the gods don't feel like you're retexting them at 3 a.m. with no warning. The moon, like a good calendar, is basically a polite agreement between humans and the universe. And the god who often wears that agreement like a soft crown is Khonsu Traveler, Moon, quiet scheduler of nights. Khonsu is one of those gods who sounds energetic on paper. His name is tied to traveling, to moving, to crossing. But in his sleepy telling, he feels more like someone who takes a nightly walk for health and insists it counts as a journey. You can picture him as the kind of deity who would say, gently, yes, I traveled, even if he only went from one end of the sky to the other, which, to be fair, is still more steps than most of us get in a day. And yet his traveling is so steady, so reliable, that people build their entire sense of timing around it. That is a very soothing kind of power. Not the power to surprise you, the power to return. Now, if you're still awake at this point, you can subscribe, or you can let that thought drift away like lamp smoke. Khonsu won't judge you. The moon certainly won't. It will continue its shift either way, as if it has a contract written in silver. And the temple, the night staff, yes, we can call them that, because this is very much a night shift moves with the slow confidence of people who have done the same tasks hundreds of times. They do not hustle, they do not gasp. They do not say, we must save the world. They say things like, bring the oil and check the water clock and is the wick trimmed? This is holiness by routine. It is myth that feels like housekeeping, which is honestly one of the most comforting genres. A lamp is set in its niche. The flame is small, disciplined. A scribe might be nearby with a palette little wells of pigment like tiny ponds black for ordinary writing. Red for emphasis because even ancient paperwork enjoys highlighting. A priest adjusts his linen, not because a god is picky, but because ritual is a language and clothing is part of grammar. You can almost feel the night becoming organized around you, as if the air itself is being lined up in careful columns. And then there is timekeeping. Timekeeping sounds modern, like an app you forget to check, but in Egypt it is a quiet obsession, because timing is one of the few ways humans can cooperate with gods. You cannot force the Nile to behave. You cannot force the sun to slow down, but you can meet the gods at the correct hour, with the correct words, and the correct offerings, and that feels like control in a world that is mostly water, wind, and chance. So how do you measure night softly without a digital clock glowing in your face? You use tools that are almost charming in their calmness. A water clock, dripping steadily, turning time into a sound you can ignore until you need it. A merkhet, a simple sighting tool, helping you line up stars like you're aligning a shelf. The decans, those star groups that rise in sequence, become a kind of celestial schedule board. The sky is full of tiny appointments, and someone has to keep track, because the gods love order the way tired people love clean sheets. The moon adds another layer to this. The lunar months, waxing and waning, the bright nights and the dark nights. Some nights the moon is generous, pouring light across courtyards like spilled milk. Some nights it is stingy, a thin curve, as if it's saving its brightness for later. And one night, quietly famous, the moon disappears entirely. The day of invisibility, as it's sometimes described, is the kind of phrase that makes you want to whisper even more. A day when the moon is not visible, when the sky feels slightly blank. It's not scary, it's just empty like a page before the scribe starts writing. Some people find that emptiness unsettling. Others find it comforting because it means even the moon is allowed to rest. This is where the mythology becomes pleasantly bureaucratic, because if the moon has a schedule, someone has to interpret it. And interpretation in Egypt is not only about dreams, it is also about calendars. A lunar cycle affects festivals, offerings, temple routines. You can almost imagine the gods as polite managers of the cosmos checking boxes. Has the proper hymn been said on the proper day? Has the offering been made at the correct phase? Has someone acknowledged that the moon is, once again, doing its job? It sounds funny, but it's also deeply human. We love making agreements with reality. It makes reality feel less enormous. And floating behind all this is Thoth, the god of writing and reckoning, the divine patron of anyone who has ever had to count something carefully and not lose their place. If Khonsu is the visible moon, Thoth is the invisible paperwork that makes the moon socially useful. Thoth is the reason a changing sky becomes a system rather than a surprise. In sleepy terms, Thoth feels like the calm coworker who always has the correct form. You bring him your confusion, and he hands you a neat answer in ink. He does not raise his voice. He does not throw the papyrus. He simply records. So in the temple, the scribes and priests are not just watching the moon for beauty. They are watching it like a sign that tells them how to behave. A full moon might mean a certain hymn, a certain offering, a certain emphasis. A thin moon might mean something quieter, something smaller. A dark moon might mean a shift inward, a recognition that not everything needs to be visible to be real. That's a micro lesson the Egyptians were surprisingly good at. The invisible still counts. The unseen still has weight. The night part of life is not a mistake. It's a necessary half. And if you need a modern analogy that won't wake you up, think of it like this. The moon is a gentle notification system. It doesn't buzz. It doesn't demand. It just changes its face, and if you care, you notice. If you don't care, it still changes. Either way, the system keeps running. Now, move a little deeper into the temple night, and you find the part that always makes things feel cozy. The small rituals that respond to uncertainty. Because the night is full of unknowns. People are asleep, doors are closed, dreams are busy. And even if you're not thinking about demons or dangerous spirits, you're still thinking about the ordinary fragility of life. Illness, childbirth, travel, bad luck that slips in like dust. Temples, in this sense, can become night clinics. Not with dramatic surgery, but with controlled environments, soothing routines, and rituals that turn fear into something you can handle. If someone has had a troubling dream, for example, they might come quietly, not to be entertained, but to be steadied. The temple does not treat them like a character in a story. It treats them like a person who needs the world to make sense for a few minutes. A priest might ask what was seen, what was felt, what symbol arrived. The dream might involve a snake, or water, or teeth, or an empty jar images the Egyptians loved to file into categories, because categories are soothing. Categories are shelves. When the mind is messy, a shelf is a gift. And if the dream suggests imbalance, the response is often simple. Wash, burn incense, speak protective words, make a small offering. Nothing extreme. The logic is always the same. Shrink the problem down to something you can do with your hands. A bit of natron for cleansing, a string tied in a knot, an amulet pressed into the palm, a little eye of Horus clean, blue-green, calm like a reminder that protection can be portable. Khonsu fits into this world quietly because he is associated not only with the moon, but sometimes with healing. There are stories where he helps, where he is invoked for relief, where his power travels. And in a sleepy tone, you can imagine that healing is just another form of timekeeping. Illness is the body's disorder. Healing is the body returning to rhythm. The moon is a rhythm you can see, so it becomes a comforting symbol for rhythms you cannot see: your heartbeat, your breathing, your recovery, your slow return to normal after fear. So a person might sit in a temple space at night, under the calm authority of stone and lamplight, and feel their anxiety loosen, not because they have solved everything, but because the temple offers structure, and structure is a kind of medicine. The water clock drips, the hymn cadence repeats, the incense rises. The moon does its slow work outside, and your mind, which was spinning, begins to copy the rhythm. It begins to behave like the world is steady because it is surrounded by steady things. There's also a gentle irony here. People sometimes imagine ancient religion as loud and dramatic, full of shouting and thunder. But so much of it, especially at night, is quiet. It's procedural. It's about not panicking. It's about adjusting. It's about treating fear the way you treat weather, prepare, adapt. Do not worship the storm. In fact, the idea of a temple as a night clinic suggests something very modern, that sometimes the best treatment is a calm environment and a routine that makes you feel held. The Egyptians did not have neon signs, they had lamps. They did not have waiting room chairs, they had cool floors. They did not have paperwork in triplicate, at least not in the exact way we enjoy it today. But they did have scribes, and scribes are basically the ancestor of every system that keeps a human life from turning into chaos. A scribe is a person who says, we will record this, we will not let it dissolve, and that too is soothing. As the night continues, the moon rises higher, and the temple's relationship with it feels almost intimate. The moon is not just the light source, it is a sign of continuity. It is proof that the world has a pattern. It makes the sky less frightening because it gives the darkness a face. Even when the moon is thin, it is still a face. Even when it disappears, the idea of it remains like a friend who isn't currently in the room but will return. And then, without anyone making an announcement, you feel the fourth scene of this whole sleepy thought drift into place. The secret under the system. Because the secret is not actually about Khonsu or Thoth or water clocks or temples. The secret is why humans love manuals in the first place, why we keep lists, why we write down dreams, why we count days, why we label phases. A manual promises translation. It promises that the world is not just happening to you. It promises that you can learn the language of what happens. A moon calendar is comforting because it turns the sky into a schedule, and schedules are a soft form of hope. They say, this will happen again. Even bad phases pass. Even dark nights change. The moon waxes, the moon wanes, the moon returns. And if your mind is tired, that promise is enough. You don't need fireworks. You need repetition. So the dream book and the moon book, if we can call the calendar that share the same emotional purpose, they take the messy inner world and the messy outer world and give them labels you can hold. Good, bad, inverted, invisible, full, new. Labels may not always be accurate in a scientific way, but they are accurate in a human way. They reduce overwhelm. They create a feeling of grip, and that is why these systems spread across time. A dream manual goes viral because everyone has slept and everyone has woken up with a feeling they didn't ask for. A moon calendar becomes essential because everyone has looked up and needed the sky to mean something steady. A protective amulet becomes popular because fear is ancient and holding something small is easier than holding fear itself. If you want a bedtime oath for all of this, something you can keep without clenching, then keep it like the Egyptians kept their best habits. Simple, repeatable, gentle. Keep the night in one jar, images, worries, half-formed symbols, and keep the meaning in another jar lightly held, not forced. Let Khonsu do his traveling without you needing to supervise him. Let Thoth do his counting without you needing to double-check every line. Let the moon be what it is, a steady reminder that change can be orderly. And if a thought scares you, make your response small and practical. Drink water, wash your hands, slow your breathing, treat interpretation like a lantern, not a verdict. You don't have to win against the night. You only have to move through it with softness the way the moon moves. Quietly, reliably, without rushing as if it could continue like this forever, and maybe it will. And maybe you can. Let your mind follow that rhythm now, drifting gently, letting the lamp dim, letting the papyrus rest, letting the calendar turn its calm pages in the dark while the night keeps speaking in pictures and you keep very quietly falling asleep. You might not expect an ancient culture to keep something like a night manual, the way you keep a small instruction booklet in a kitchen drawer. slightly bent at the corners and always nearby, but Egypt did in its own soft way. Not because the night was dramatic, but because the night was busy. It produced dreams like a quiet factory produces good, steady, strange, sometimes useful, sometimes just oddly shaped. And when you wake up with a dream still stuck to your thoughts like a papyrus fiber on a damp thumb, it's comforting to believe there's a system for it. A system, a label, a little note that says, if you saw this, then do that. It's the kind of comfort that doesn't shout. It simply offers a shelf for your mind to rest on. So imagine there is a scroll beside the bed. Not a grand scroll for royal announcements, not a scroll that demands trumpets. Just a practical one, rolled tight, kept close like medicine. The room around it is ordinary in the way ordinary rooms are always the most believable. Woven mats that remember the shape of bodies, a cooling jar of water sweating quietly in the corner, a small oil lamp that has learned the art of being enough. The lamp is not trying to be the sun. It is trying to be a friend. It throws a soft, steady light onto the papyrus, onto a reed pen, onto the little wells of ink in a palette black for most things. Red for the things you really don't want to misread when you're half awake. The smoke curls in slow punctuation. The fibers of the papyrus sigh under a careful thumb. And if you're listening right now from wherever you are at whatever time it is, you can let that be your only effort for a moment, just noticing. Where are you and what time is it? And how quiet can the room become around those words? In Egypt, a dream can be treated like a message that arrives when your mind finally stops fidgeting long enough to receive mail. That doesn't mean every dream is a prophecy. It means every dream is worth sorting. There is something deeply human about that. We sort grain. We sort laundry. We sort feelings when we can. And if you have ever woken up with a single image water, teeth, a snake, a loaf of bread sitting in your head like an uninvited guest, you understand the urge to organize it. A dream book is what happens when that urge becomes tradition. It reads sometimes like a list. Symbol, outcome, instruction. Not poetry. Not philosophy. More like triage. The night has handed you a small, confusing package, and the dream book offers scissors and tape. The strange part, if you think about it, is not that people dream. The strange part is the belief that dreams can be indexed, that they can be filed into categories like good and bad, as if the night is a marketplace of omens with price tags you can read. But that belief brings comfort too, because it implies the world has a grammar. If the world has a grammar, then confusion is not a curse. It's just a sentence you haven't learned to parse yet. Of course, not everyone owned the key to that grammar. Not everyone read papyrus. Not everyone had the time or training to sit with symbols and decide what they meant. Interpretation becomes a kind of social power, and Egypt, like any society, had its gatekeepers of meaning. Scribes, priests, experienced elders who could hold a sign the way a locksmith holds tools. Some dream knowledge lives in temples, linked to gods, purity, and ritual timing. Some dream knowledge lives in houses, practical and anxious, meant to prevent tomorrow's mistakes. The dream book sits between those worlds like a small bridge. It is both sacred and domestic, which is exactly why it feels so cozy. It makes the divine feel like something you can keep beside your bed, rolled up neatly, ready for use. And here is a soft thought you can carry without gripping. The dream book doesn't just interpret dreams. It teaches you a habit of mind. It teaches you to pause before you panic. It teaches you to say, let's check, instead of, it's over. That alone is a kind of magic, quiet, unglamorous magic. The kind that looks suspiciously like self-control. If you're still awake in a few minutes, you can subscribe, or you can let the thought drift away like lamp smoke, curling up and disappearing. No one will chase you down the corridor of the internet with a stern face. In ancient Egypt, even the gods waited their turn. The Nile certainly did. Now let the dream book open gently in your imagination and notice how it works. It breaks a dream into parts the way a sentence is broken into words. Animals, water, bread, fire, teeth, snakes each with a known taste, as if symbols have flavors you can learn. And it's surprisingly blunt. One image can mean wealth, another can mean sickness, another can mean an enemy's attention, which is a polite way of saying someone is thinking about you in a way you might not enjoy. There isn't always a grand story. Often there is just a note. This is what it tends to mean. Now decide how to behave. The dream book's bluntness is almost funny when you think about how chaotic dreams feel. Dreams are messy. Dreams are moody. Dreams change scenes without warning and put you in places you've never been wearing shoes you don't own. And yet the dream book looks at all that and says calmly, yes, we've seen this before. It's like a tired librarian who has watched generations of human minds stumble in, wide-eyed, holding bizarre images, and the librarian just points to the correct shelf. Sometimes the dream book labels entries as good or bad, which is a little unfair to dreams, but very kind to anxious people. It turns the night into something you can evaluate. You can imagine someone waking up, rubbing sleep out of their eyes and thinking, I dreamed of water, and then feeling their chest tighten. But the dream book might say water is change or cleansing or sometimes trouble, depending on the context. And context matters. Egypt loved context. Egypt loved rules. Egypt loved the idea that the universe had manners. And then there is the part that makes the system feel even more intriguing. The flipping of meaning. Some symbols invert. What looks frightening can be good, and what looks pleasant can be bad, like a mirror with rules. To dream of death might signal long life. To dream of feasting might warn of loss. That reversal keeps the interpreter important, because you cannot trust your first instinct. The dream book becomes a quiet authority that teaches you to doubt your own reactions, which, honestly, is a very modern lesson delivered in ancient packaging. Your mind says, this is terrifying, and the dream book says, maybe, or maybe it's fine. Let's be cautious without being dramatic. It's the kind of voice you want at night. This is where God slides softly into the background, not as thunderous figures, but as principles. Matt is there, like a featherlight reminder that order matters. Thoth is there, the patron of writing and reckoning, the calm divine clerk who believes that if you record something, you reduce its power to haunt you. There's a gentle irony in that. Writing down a dream can be a ritual, but it's also a coping strategy. You move the dream from the body into the page. You give it a border. You turn it into an object you can look at, instead of a fog you have to breathe. And because Egypt was Egypt, even the calendar can sneak into this. Some days were considered more charged than others days when certain actions were wise or unwise, days that carried particular divine moods. The dream book doesn't have to be fully consistent across time and place for it to be comforting. It only has to do one thing well, make you feel like the night is not random. The moment you believe the night can be read, the night becomes less heavy. Now, drift into what people did after a bad dream, because this is where the story becomes almost tender in its practicality. A bad dream is not a sentence. It is a problem to be managed with routine, the way you manage heat with shade. That is a very Egyptian attitude. Do not panic, adjust. People might wash. They might burn incense. They might speak protective words in a low voice, not because the gods are deaf, but because fear doesn't like being shouted at. Fear likes being calmed. Protective words can be as simple as naming things, because naming things shrinks them. It's hard to be devoured by a vague dread when someone has put it into a sentence. Amulets come in here not as flashy treasures, but as small repairs you can hold. Eyes, knots, little protective gods objects that turn fear into something portable. An eye of Horus pressed into the palm. A knot tied and retied because repetition is soothing and also conveniently looks like magic. A tiny base figure, grinning like a household bouncer with excellent comedic timing, there to scare off the things that creep around the edges of sleep. Base is one of those gods who feels like he belongs near a bed because he does. He is not grand. He is useful. He is the kind of divine presence that says, go to sleep. I'll handle the weird stuff, and honestly, that's a service. Even the act of writing the dream down is itself a repair. A dream is slippery. It fades. But if you catch it in ink, it becomes stable enough to examine. It becomes a thing with corners, and corners, as any sleepy person knows, are easier to deal with than fog. If the dream feels serious, the temple becomes a place to ask for clearer signals or safer outcomes. Not in the sense of dramatic intervention, but in the sense of professional calm. Temples at night can feel like clinics, not because they do modern medicine, but because they offer structure. Priests can frame the dream within divine order, at again, so it feels less like chaos and more like instruction. Offerings are often ordinary: bread, beer, oil. Practical items, things you can prepare. Nothing that requires a heroic quest. And the logic is gentle. You have received a troubling sign, so you respond with a small, steady action. You do not collapse. You do not spiral. You do something manageable. There's a strangely comforting humility in that. The Egyptians did not always pretend they could control everything. They knew the Nile had moods. They knew illness could arrive. They knew fate could be sharp. But they also believed in maintenance, in repair, in the idea that a life is not one dramatic moment, but a long series of tiny adjustments. Wash, speak, burn, tie, offer, sleep again. And if you listen closely, you can hear the soft humor in it too, because humans are humans. Someone somewhere must have had a nightmare and then had to go find incense half asleep, bumping into a jar, whispering protective words while trying not to wake the household. Someone must have looked at a dream book entry and thought, really? A snake means this? Fine, sure, I'll do the ritual. You can almost see the resigned nod of a person cooperating with tradition, the way you cooperate with a morning alarm. Not because you love it, but because it's part of how you keep your life from wobbling. Now we drift into the secret under the system, the part that makes the whole thing quietly profound without needing to announce itself. A dream manual is comforting because it promises translation for the one thing you cannot control, your sleeping mind. You cannot order your dreams like you order food. You cannot schedule them like meetings. They arrive. They happen to you. And that helplessness is what the manual tries to soothe. It gives anxiety a script. If you saw this, do that, and scripts calm people down. They turn the unknown into a sequence. The dream book also reveals what a culture fears and hopes for: illness, betrayal, fertility, food, status, safe travel. These themes show up again and again because they are the ordinary pressure points of being human. In that way, the dream book is less about prophecy and more about admitting fragility. It says softly, yes, life is uncertain. Here's how we cope. Here's how we make a little order. And the trick is that the dream book doesn't really eliminate fear. It redirects it. It turns fear into action. It turns vague dread into a bowl of water, a pinch of incense, a sentence spoken with care. It turns the night into something you can participate in, rather than something you simply endure. That's the secret. Participation is soothing. So if you want a bedtime oath for night messages, keep it simple, like a small jar with a lid that fits. Keep the dream in one jar: images, feelings, fragments, and keep meaning in another, lightly held, never forced. Treat symbols like weather. Prepare, adjust. Do not worship the forecast. If a symbol scares you, make your response small and practical. Rest, water, kindness, a slower day. If you need to, write it down, because ink is a gentle boundary. And if you don't need to, let the dream dissolve, because not every image deserves to become a law. Tomorrow, treat interpretation like a lantern, not a verdict. It should help you see, not trap you. The lamp dims. The papyrus rests. The reed pen is set down with the quiet satisfaction of a tool that has done its work. Outside, the night continues its steady habits, and inside, your mind can do the same, softly filing away what it can, letting the rest drift into the dark without chasing it, letting the system be comforting without needing it to be perfect, letting the images fade like smoke that curls once, twice, and then becomes part of the air again, while the night keeps speaking in pictures and you keep, very quietly, falling asleep. You might not expect the sun to have a night shift, but in Egypt it did, and it ran on a schedule so steady you could almost set your breathing to it. The sun went down, yes, but it didn't stop. It simply changed boats, changed paperwork, changed the tone of its duties, the way a person changes into softer clothes when the house finally goes quiet. Ra had a day boat and a night boat, and the night boat, often called the Mesiktet, was the one that moved through the dark with the calm determination of someone who has done this route so many times it feels like a hallway at home. And if you're listening right now from wherever you are at whatever time it is, you can answer softly in your head, where are you and what time is it, and is the room willing to be still for a while? Picture the scene the way the Egyptians like to picture things, not with frantic motion, but with clear roles. A boat, a crew, a purpose. The darkness is not chaos. It's a place with gates, hours, names, and manners. Even the night had labels. They divided it into 12 hours, and the hours were not just numbers, but almost like rooms you pass through. Some are more crowded with symbols, some are quieter. The point is that the night is structured. That belief alone is soothing. It means you are not floating. You are traveling. And if your mind is the kind that likes to float in anxious circles at bedtime, it can be comforting to borrow Egypt's idea for a while. You are not spiraling, you are simply passing through an hour with a particular atmosphere, and soon you will pass into another. Ra's crew is where the story becomes gently absurd in the best way, because it's not only gods and cosmic principles. It's also, very quietly, a team. Some sources talk about companions like Siad, who represents perception, and who. The power of authoritative speech, two very Egyptian ideas, because Egypt loved the thought that noticing and naming are serious forms of control. Pekka, the force of magic itself, is never far away either, because in Egypt, a word spoken correctly can be a tool. Mat is there too, not as a judge with thunder, but as the idea that the boat must stay aligned, morally and mechanically, because a crooked world feels uncomfortable to inhabit. Sometimes in some traditions, even Set shows up in the boat. Estuary is a kind of rough-edged helper against the problems of the night, which is a reminder that Egypt could be surprisingly practical. If someone is useful, you make room for them, even if they have a complicated reputation. The funniest part is that the boat is often drawn with a level of detail that makes it feel less like a distant myth and more like a real vessel you could walk onto. There are ropes, there are oars. There's a prow that looks like it has a job to do. And because Egypt loved protective objects, the boat also carries protection in the form of symbols you could almost inventory. A coiled serpent called Mayhem can appear as a protective presence around Ra, which sounds dramatic if you say it quickly, but if you say it slowly, it becomes oddly cozy. A guardian that wraps rather than strikes, a kind of cosmic blanket with scales. Amulets aren't only for human necks. They're a habit of thought. If something matters, you protect it. If the night matters, you protect the night journey. This is an entire culture's bedtime logic, scaled up to the sky. If you're still awake, you can subscribe, or you cannot. Both choices are allowed. Ra does not personally check subscriber numbers in the underworld, and if he did, he would probably appoint Thoth to do it, because Thoth is the sort of god who would enjoy a neatly organized spreadsheet of cosmic engagement. You can let that image drift by as gently silly as it is and return to the boat. Now imagine the Mazet moving, not with urgency, but with routine. The Egyptians did not always tell the night journey as a single dramatic fight. Even when they included danger, they framed it like a problem that must be managed through procedure. The great serpent Apophis exists in many versions of the story as a force of disruption, but you don't have to picture a thrilling battle to understand what the myth is doing. You can picture it like this instead. The night contains resistance. The night contains friction. The night contains the part of existence that doesn't want to cooperate. And the answer is not panic. The answer is a ritual toolkit, words, knives in the sense of symbolic cutting, spells written down, names spoken correctly, the kind of response that feels, honestly, like paperwork done with devotion. Egypt was very good at devotional paperwork. And that brings us to one of the sleepiest, most comforting ideas Egypt offers. The world can be negotiated with the right forms, not conquered, not dominated, simply negotiated. If you know the right name, if you know the right phrase, if you do the action in the right order, you reduce chaos into something that behaves. This is why a god of writing and measurement mattered so much. The universe in Egypt had to be readable. If it was readable, then even your fear could be translated. So the boat passes through its hours like a person moving through a dark house at night, careful not to stub a toe, careful not to wake anyone. Sometimes there are images of gates with guardians, and again, you can imagine those guardians not as monsters, but as doormen with rules. They want the correct password. They want the correct posture. They want the correct offering, which may be as simple as a name spoken cleanly. There's something almost tender about that. It suggests that even the unknown has etiquette. Even the frightening parts of existence can be met with calm competence. If you've ever woken up from a dream and tried to interpret it, you already understand why this matters. The mind loves a key. It loves a small method. It loves to believe that if you do one sensible thing, the world becomes slightly more manageable. Egypt built entire myth systems out of that preference. They gave you Mat as a featherweight concept. Balance matters. They gave you Thoth as a reminder. Record it. They gave you amulets shaped like the jet pillar stability you can hold in your hand. They gave you the tie-it knot, often linked to Isis, like a soft promise that protection can be tied, not only prayed. And all of this cosmic movement had echoes on Earth, which is another micro-hook that Egypt loved. What happens in the sky is mirrored in the house, and what happens in the house is mirrored in the sky. At night, in ordinary rooms, people lit lamps that behaved like small suns. They burned incense that rose like a tiny version of temple smoke. They wore protective amulets, not because they expected a dramatic event, but because they were participating in the same logic the gods used. Keep things steady, keep things guarded, keep the night from feeling like an empty, lawless space. Even the daily temple routines can be thought of as a human version of the sunboats and schedule. In many temples, priests would perform acts like washing the statue of a god, clothing it, offering food, speaking hymns, acts that sound ceremonial, but also sound, if you tilt your head, like very careful caretaking. The god is treated like something real enough to feed, and feeding is a quiet kind of devotion. The sun is treated like something real enough to accompany, and accompaniment is a quiet kind of faith. And it all runs on time. Egypt loved time. Not rush time, but measure time. They even watched the stars for timekeeping at night decans, star groups that rise in sequence, acting like a celestial clock. Imagine that. The night is so structured that you can tell the hour by which stars are peeking over the horizon. That is a level of organization that can make a modern person feel both impressed and slightly called out. Like, yes, I know, I should probably have a better sleep schedule too, but you don't need to feel judged by it. You can just borrow the softness of it. The idea that the night is not one big blur. It has steps. It has markers. It has gentle progress. And while we're drifting through these details, you can let your mind catch on small, oddly specific things, the way a sleepy mind likes to do. The idea that the day boat is often called the Manjet. The idea that the night boat has its own name and personality. The way Egyptians sometimes personified hours as goddesses or beings with specific roles, like a long procession of time wearing different outfits. The way a protective dwarf god like Bes could be painted on household objects, grinning with the confidence of someone who has made a career out of intimidating bad vibes. The way Taret, hippo-bodied and fiercely domestic, could show up as a protector of mothers and babies because Egypt understood that the scariest part of life is often not cosmic, it's just fragile humans trying to make it through the night safely. If you want a tiny modern analogy, you can imagine the sunboat's night journey like a long, quiet train ride with scheduled stops. You don't need to be excited about it. You just need to know it's moving. Your body likes that idea too. Your body likes to feel that sleep is not a sudden cliff, but a gradual travel from one station to the next. Inhale slowly and exhale a little longer, and let that be the boat's oar stroke. Steady and unimpressed by the drama your thoughts sometimes try to invent. Now let us wander into one of the sleepiest corners of the myth, the idea that the night can be read and handled through correct speech. In Egypt, words were not only sounds, they were actions. Names mattered. To know a name was to touch the structure of a thing. This is why so many Egyptian texts, funerary texts, hymns, temple inscriptions feel like they are doing something, not merely saying something. The Book of the Dead, for example, is not a book in the modern sense and not always one fixed text. It's a collection of spells and formulas meant to guide, protect, and instruct. It's a toolkit, a suitcase of phrases for a journey, and that idea is so deeply bedtime friendly. You don't face the unknown with raw emotion. You face it with prepared sentences. You can almost imagine someone carefully copying a spell onto papyrus, taking care with the ink, using red ink for emphasis, making sure the hieroglyphs are correct. Because if the universe is a system, you don't want typos. That's a very calm kind of seriousness. And it connects back to dreams, too. Because dreams are also a system in Egypt's imagination. You dream, you wake, you consult, you respond. The night gives you images. You answer with ritual. That's the rhythm. There's also something gently funny in the way humans try to bargain with uncertainty. If I do this small action, maybe the big fear won't happen. Egypt institutionalized that impulse in a way that can feel both comforting and relatable. And they did it with objects that are charmingly specific. A little scarab amulet for rebirth and transformation, sometimes placed over the heart. A wedget eye for protection and wholeness. Knots that symbolize binding and unbinding because Egypt liked the idea that problems can be tied up neatly. Even the offering of beer shows up in myths in an almost comical way, like the famous story where beer dyed red is used to calm a dangerous goddess who might otherwise be too fiery, which is Egypt's gentle reminder that sometimes the most effective cosmic intervention is a beverage and a nap. And maybe that, ask the feeling you want right now. The idea that even big forces can be softened, that the night does not have to be wrestled. It can be soothed. It can be guided. It can be escorted through its hours with a steady hand and a soft lamp. So as we drift toward the final stretch of this bedtime current, let the sunboat become less of a myth you have to understand and more of a pattern you can rest inside. The boat moves through hour after hour. The crew stays calm. The tools are prepared. The names are spoken. The stars mark time with quiet precision. And the world, and this worldview, is not fragile because it is perfect. It is stable because it is maintained. Maintenance is a beautiful, boring concept. It's the thing you do every day that prevents disaster, not through heroism, but through consistency. If you want a small oath to carry into sleep, make it as simple as an amulet you could hold between finger and thumb. Keep your worries in one jar and your responses in another. Let your responses be small, water, breath, a slower pace. A bit of kindness you can offer yourself without needing to earn it. If a thought feels like Apophis too big, too coiling, too disruptive, treat it like the Egyptians treated disruption. Not with panic, but with procedure. A phrase you repeat. A boundary you set. A light you dim. A room you keep quiet. And if the mind insists on showing you images, let it. Images are what minds do. You do not need to solve them tonight. Ra does not solve the night in one dramatic moment either. He passes through it, hour by hour, with a crew that believes in steady work. You can do the same. You can pass through the hour you're in now, and then pass into the next, and then into the next, until the moment arrives when you don't notice the transition anymore. The lamp dims, the smoke curls and thins, the reed pen rests. The papyrus doesn't need to be rolled perfectly. It only needs to be put down. Outside, the stars continue their quiet schedule, decan after decan, marking time without demanding attention. And somewhere in the mythic distance, the night boat continues its route with the calm confidence of routine, carrying light through darkness the way you carry. A warm thought through a quiet room, until even that thought softens, loosens, and fades, and your breathing becomes the only story left steady, unhurried, and perfectly. Willing to drift a little further and a little further, and then not keep track at all,